Good evening and welcome to Legal Tech Live. This is episode 116 or 17. You'll catch that on the replay. We'll have the correct numbers for you. I'm your host, Nick Rishwain, and I'm here with Mark Doble of Alexi. And that's Alexi, ALXSEI.com. Alexi is an advanced artificial intelligence platform which delivers affordable and high-quality answers to legal questions in memo format. Our guest, Mark Doble, is the co-founder and CEO. Mark is a lawyer and a software developer with a passion for leveraging software to make the law more affordable and understandable. He received his JD from Queen's University and in a previous life was a professional cross-country ski racer and coach. Mark, welcome to the show. Happy to have you. Glad we were able to get connected. Mark is in the South Bay enjoying the weather. He's not stuck in Toronto tonight. We're happy to have him. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks a lot, Nick. Thanks. I'm looking forward to doing this, so appreciate it.
Me too. I'm happy to have you on. I think we met on Clubhouse originally.
Yeah.
And I saw legal memos, which was not a topic that I had covered, I don't think. There's research involved, from what I understand from your demo, but it's fascinating. So tell us, expand on your background for me, and then tell me how you went from law into legal technology.
Sure. Yeah. So I went to law school and during law school spent about half my time reading the required readings, getting through which I absolutely loved law school. I loved reading about the law, but I spent the other half of my time building software and started out just as web developer, and then got really interested into machine learning and NLP, and just seeing how fast the field was changing, the powerful tools that were coming out, the things that could be done and would be done. I just got really excited about the fusion of the two. Really fascinating. The legal system was really fascinating, and the technology was really fascinating. And so I spent less than a year in a law firm, and then started Alexi. So.
And how long has Alexi been in operation now?
It was coming up on 4 years, actually. We spent the first about year and a half, 2 years building the product, building the back-end technology, and then we've been about 2 years now, growing quite quickly right across Canada. Recently launched in California. So.
Excellent. So give us a little rundown. I've seen the demo. Those who are watching live in the Facebook and in Zoom, as questions develop, please go ahead and post them. We'll try and answer them live. But tell us about the product. I've seen the demo. I'm assuming others have not. So describe that to us. What does Alexi do?
Yeah, so I guess the tagline right now is legal memos on demand, and we produce legal research memos, but we call them memos because that's what the industry is familiar with. In our view, the memo is just the vehicle for answering complex legal questions, and so more fundamentally, we just answer routine and complex legal questions. And our view is that the legal memo, a computer-generated or machine-generated legal research memo, this is the end state of legal research products. This is what technology, everything's driving towards, is you type in a question and you get the answer. And it just so happens that legal questions are inherently of such a nature that they require a memo to provide an answer. They're not like questions, how tall is the Eiffel Tower, which you can just get a line, a number even with some units, and that answers the question. Whereas a legal question, it requires much more. And we often refer to it as the smallest indivisible unit of an answer, or a fundamental unit of knowledge. Legal knowledge is a memo. It's specifically how we've designed the Alexi memos.
And the demo, so the memo, I sort of, in my mind, divide the memo into two items, right? Almost like a brief or a factual background of a case that you're sending to somebody else. And then there's the more of the memo of points and authorities. And this seems to be a kind of a memorandum of points and authorities. So when
Exactly.
according to the demo. Now, maybe those who I don't practice, but maybe those who do just call the memorandum of points and authorities a memo. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so, but this, I mean, it looks like it provides you, here's all the authorities you need. This is the legal question or legal issue, and here's your answer, and here's all the supporting authorities for your answer.
Yeah, so just this might be too much detail, but the memos are,
Sure.
there's a conclusion and then there's a background law section, and the conclusion, we think of it as abstracted legal principles. So there's authorities in parentheses. So they're okay. Here are some authorities. There could be several that provide support for this statement of law, this legal principle. This is what the conclusion consists of, and then the background law is a discussion of the authorities specifically. These are the facts of this case. This is the key finding of this case, and yeah, talk a little bit more also about how those are put together.
Yeah, and so that was kind of the thing that popped in my mind watching the demo. For those who watch the show regularly or listen to the podcast, you know that I don't like to do a heck of a lot of research pre-conversation, because that kind of screws up the conversation, the actual conversation. It doesn't allow for a lot of flexibility. But if there's a demo, I do like to watch it, and I did in this case. And I wanted to know, where are you pulling this research from? Where do you get the data to answer these memos? The demo tells me that you put in your question, and in about 24 hours or sometimes less, you get your memo. And so I was like, okay, well, that's cool, but where's all the data coming from?
Yeah, so there's so two components. There's the AI component, and then we have 6 full-time lawyers that work for the company. They're QA, quality assurance research lawyers that sometimes, if it's a very obscure question come in, they do almost everything to put the answer together. And we would lose money on this particular memo, but we know that long term, it's there, that content, it goes back into the AI, it's learning, and inevitably that question comes in again, and we do a much better job at, the AI does a much better job at putting an answer together.
Because that's a data point for you. Now you've done that research and you've input that into the system, and now that's the AI learns from that, correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So in some of these situations, you actually have to, you might require full human research.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's important for us from a product perspective that we don't want our customers to have to think, well, is this a question that the AI will perform well on or not? That should not be the concern of the customer. The customer should only be concerned about, I have a question and I need the best way to get a comprehensive answer. And so it's our job now to build the technology, to have the operations, the human element incorporated, such that we can deliver on that high quality, affordable answers to any legal question.
Excellent. All right. And so in addition to the human element, where else do you pull data from? Where's the AI pull data from?
Yeah. So
if you can, like, if there's proprietary that you're
of
afraid
course,
to share, keep that to yourself.
Yeah, of course. And there's several patents that we're in the process of pursuing right now. And so at some point it'll be great for us to talk about a lot of this stuff. I will just say that that we've spent a lot of time on building natural language generation models. And
Okay.
as soon as you can generate text, you can generate the data you need to train models.
Right.
And this has been, we call it in lots of different industries, synthetic data generation or synthetic data to train other downstream tasks. And this is a big part of what we've done. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. And so tell us about, so you practiced for a year before before this company became what you were working on, correct?
Oh yeah. So I mean, it started the idea. I mean, the idea started, let's just try and aggregate this task of the human work of putting together this research. I mean, it pretty quickly, and at the back of my mind, it was like, okay, this we're going to be an AI company. We're going to be an AI company at some point, but right now, let's just figure out if lawyers are willing to type questions into a web application and get a memo back. And And there's so much around the product and the pricing and all of these things that we've had to figure out, and just the understanding what is actually involved in putting these memos together. What are the humans actually doing, and then let's translate that into technology language that software engineers understand, and then give them a problem to solve.
So this is ongoing research and development on.
Absolutely. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. No, the vision of this company is much bigger than Memos. We
Than
just
Memos.
believe that you have to start with a core AI that knows the law, and there's the potential applications that can flow from this are immense, and that's we're just starting from a very fundamental first principles. Let's build this really sophisticated piece of software that knows the law. uh, it's ambitious, and but that's what we're working on.
That's what you're working on. Okay. So how about that first question that you asked yourself? Can you get a lawyer to ask a question to get a memo back? Have you answered that question?
Yeah, and absolutely. I think there's yeah, it's a huge topic, for sure, and there's lots of nuance to it, but absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And so you've had users who are doing this. They've come to you. They say, well, yeah, I need an answer on this question. I don't have the time to research it. Let me see if I can input this question and get the memo back.
Oh yeah, we've been for almost 18 months now. We've been growing 15% month over month. There's thousands of lawyers on a
Wow.
weekly basis that are relying on us. It's yeah, we've been growing. It's been wild for the past year and a half. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Excellent. That's fantastic. So tell us a little bit. It's early in the conversation for it, but with that kind of growth, tell me about the price. How do you price a product like this?
Yeah, so we knowing that there is this positive feedback loop with the more people interact with it, the more the technology evolves and improves. We wanted it to be a compelling price, but at the same time, we're still, it's a business, of course, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so
Sure.
and I think it's, I think the actual dollar amount is less important than the model. Subscriptions versus pay per use, annual subscriptions, monthly subscriptions, some combination of subscription and pay per use. This is the more important, and in total it works out to be about $200 per memo
Okay.
that you get. It varies based on plan, the total volume of the firm, but and the two main drivers of our subscription plans are daily limit. So there's a certain number of questions you can submit in a day, and then monthly limit.
Okay.
And yeah.
Yeah, it's a difficult model to kind of nail down what you're going to do there because you don't know what the attorney might need, how complex the litigation might be that they're.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Has that been sort of trial and error in establishing that?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's still a bit of a tug of war between our customers. We want subscriptions, of course. We want annual contracts. They prepay for some allotment, and it renews every year. They want almost universally a pay per use because it's much easier to disperse to a client file. If you're
Mm,
only paying when you can assign a client ID or number to a particular expense, it's a lot easier from accounting perspective. Yeah. So, and I think our product being much more transactional as opposed to traditional SaaS products that are 30
right.
bucks a month, it lends itself to a transactional fee that's more easily dispersible.
Yeah. And back to that kind of average of $200 for a memo is, I could have, when I was clerking, I could have spent 8 hours in a day on writing a memo. So
Yeah.
you're talking even at a law clerk's, a thousand, couple thousand, $1,500 in a day
Yeah.
for that kind of work.
Oh yeah. It's we kind of aimed for this like 10x value, right? So it had to
Right.
be a lot cheaper. It had to be really high quality, and really fast turnaround times. These are the three things. You want to get a memo as soon as possible from when the query is submitted. It needs to be very competitive from a price standpoint, and quality. And this the last one. That's actually the thing that we we feel like we compete on more than any of the other two now at this point, is just delivering really, really high quality answers.
Yeah, that's really important because you don't want your customer to come back and say, I'm quoting bad law.
Exactly.
Yeah, or citing bad
Yeah.
law. Yeah, that's no good.
Yeah.
Mizelle asks, and I'm sorry, I'm butchering that name. What were the key factors to decide between fixed subscription versus by question or inquiry? How to manage uncertain of business without term-based subscriptions? How to manage uncertain business without term-based subscriptions? I think.
Oh, well, I mean, it's still predictable, just because people are paying every interaction. So first of all, I would say close to 80%. I think it's between 75 and 80% of all our revenue is still subscription based,
Okay.
and then 20 to 25 is a transactional
Is
based.
a per use.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and it's still you can still predict these transactional costs. I mean, and there's a lot of, I think we unfortunately in SaaS, you get stuck in this idea that it's got to be subscription.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of great examples that are not subscription, and it really depends on the frequency of interaction, but mainly on the law firm business model, that their every expense that they incur for a client, they want to recoup it from their client. And so
Mhm.
that being the case, you want to make that easy for them, and they're willing to pay a bit more even.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the price and what makes it predictable is, are they getting value from the product? If they are, you can be reasonably sure that they're going to come back and use the product again.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, certainly the Valley where you're at right now seems to have kind of whittled people into the subscription, and because it's guaranteed monthly or annual recurring revenue, and that's easy for them to predict,
Yep.
but that doesn't always lend itself well to the legal environment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and especially from a like, I think one of the real innovations, I think, in SaaS in the past 10, 15 years has been a bottom up adoption, selling to businesses with a bottom up adoption. The users use it, love it. Maybe they even put their own personal credit card, they pay for it a little bit. And then eventually there's a top down traditional sales process. And I think that nobody, very few companies, I think, that I know of selling to law firms have been able to figure that out, how to do a bottom up adoption.
Hmm.
But I think that we've recently kind of hit on this idea that, well, maybe if we make it easy enough for a second, third year associate to add their personal card to incur an expense on behalf of their client, like they do for a bunch of other things, and then invoice the firm for that expense and charge it back to the client, that maybe now we can start to develop a bottom up adoption strategy within firms.
Interesting. So have you noticed that being the case with your users?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's only, I mean, part of us, we hadn't really pushed it up until now, but
Right.
now we see it that, okay, we can start to get people in these larger firms and these individual lawyers. At some point, you're acting more like a sole proprietor, just under the brand of a huge firm and the resources of a big firm. But you're managing the expenses for your own file. And so targeting those individual lawyers, yeah, we've seen it on a number of occasions, them adding their own personal card and using it, and then layering in the top down traditional sales has been really compelling. Their employees, their lawyers, are advocating to management to get a subscription. So
Fantastic. Fantastic. And how about the types of firms you're getting adopting this? Are you noticing a pretty wide range from solos, smalls, mid-size, and big law?
yeah, so it's so first, I think because we are a research product, the power users of a research product are generalist lawyers.
Hmm.
They're the ones who have an employment issue one day, a bankruptcy issue another day, maybe even a family issue the next day. They're the ones who do the most legal research. It's the IP litigation specialist in pharmaceutical products that does very little research, right?
Hmm.
And so and they're typically in the bigger firms. So I think this is one reason that we've started with smaller firms and have grown really quickly in the small to mid-sized market. But everything's moving up, and now we have the larger firms that, I mean, pretty much all of the larger firms in Canada, except for a few, are either in the pilot stage or have fully adopted it. And so it's yeah, and I think it looking at a lot of tech disruption, much of it does happen in this bottom up adoption. I think when you start at the really big firms, and there's this idea of listen to your users and build for what the users or the feedback they're giving you. I think the top law firms provide too much input on the product, and the startups, if they're tied into this huge contract with a large firm, they just feel compelled to, okay, I gotta do this for this big firm. And I think
Right.
going bottom up, even in the market, not just within a firm, is uh, I think has been the right approach for us. Yeah.
Excellent. Tell me about testimonials. I mean, not that you have to remember them, but just have you had, boy, you really saved me on this one, or
Oh
I
yeah.
was like, it was 11th hour and there was no way I was going to get it done. How's that work?
Yes, I mean the feedback we've been getting from our customers has been amazing. The biggest resistance is getting people to do a pilot, but once they
Mm.
do a pilot, we're well over 80% of firms convert to a paying customer
Oh,
after they do
nice.
a pilot, after they complete a pilot. Yeah, and so we're just at the point now that we're just signed a contract the other day with a large Canadian firm, and now we're forcing in this agreement, like, okay, in 6 months you agree to a public testimonial, and so recognizing that this, if you're familiar with the crossing the chasm, that this is a key part of it, getting these reference customers and testimonials. So
Yep.
yeah.
Very familiar. So, and anybody who's been like, that, how about that 11th hour person who's just like, maybe it's a generalist who was just not going to have time to get this memo done and they turn to you for it. Have you had that experience yet?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, and it also turns into, I mean, it's actually very common. It's very, as you know, in the legal world, everybody's leaving things really late,
Everybody's
right?
waiting till
And
the
so,
end. Yep.
yeah, exactly. And it's the thing, when we did the customer discovery very early on, one of the questions we always asked firms was, um, how many questions do you have a week that you need to look up the answer to? And then it was always some number. Then we'd follow that up with, well, how many questions do you actually look up the answer to? And it was almost always only half. And so
Right.
there's so much, and it's just the nature of the job. The law is so complex, and it's impossible for a given lawyer to know the legal issues all the time, that they need to know.
Right, right. And for those who are listening, we just had a family member or a friend walk behind the screen, and this is what we love about the live experience.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is an enjoyable part here. What do people need to know about? So, give me kind of the pitch. What you would tell somebody who's looking at this and what they need to know. Kind of elevator pitch it for me.
Yeah. So, well, I'll just focus it on the Canadian market, because
You
we're
sure?
4 months into launching in California, which has been going really well. But if in Canada at this point, it's um, we went through this phase where early on it was, the economics of it just makes so much sense. You're going to be a more profitable business. You can save time on this increasingly non-billable work of legal research. Um, and then we realized that that's not the most compelling argument. The next most compelling argument was, think of the advantage you get. Now you can know the law on every single issue that you need to know. You can be more competent for your clients. You can focus now more on novel arguments, or for the opposing counsel, or if you're before a judge, or any hearing. And now it's if you don't have it, it's a disadvantage, because chances are opposing counsel will, and you don't want to not have information that opposing counsel has. And this now is, I think, the real driver, that the reason why we've seen the growth we have in the last few months is that people are recognizing they're seeing Alexi memos more and more, and that not having it is you can't you don't know what you don't know, and that fear is driving people more to make the purchase. And in these demos recently, I've heard more and more, well, it just sounds like we can't not do this now. So
That's got to be a good feeling as a founder.
certainly, it's
Y-
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good feeling. If they know or worry that the other side might have something that they don't,
Right,
you start getting to a malpractice
right,
stage, right? If
yeah,
you're not doing, if you're not that can lead to malpractice.
yeah.
Um, so that's fantastic that you're having that experience. Tell us about some of the struggles that you've had in founding a company, because this is the startup founder journey that we discussed. So maybe a struggle that you had no idea you were going to face.
Well, I mean, the struggles are I mean, innumerable. It's it's just man, it's just incredibly hard in a way that nobody can understand until you go through it. It's kind of like having a kid. People, you kind of have some information about it, but you don't really know until you're up at 3 in the morning with a screaming baby. But yeah, it's I mean, there are some of them are just basic things, just managing cash flow, just making
Mhm.
sure that employee issues, managing culture of a company, especially through COVID, shifting mainly to remote, and um, uh, one of the one of the biggest ones I think within a founding team. So there's three co-founders in the company. One of the most important things I think is to have really vigorous debate, but that can be very dangerous. You need to keep the relationships intact, but also I think the best decisions come out of very strongly held beliefs, but opposing beliefs kind of colliding and hashing it out. The best decisions come from when that happens, but they're also the hardest to work through. It threatens the relationships, and I think Sam, JB, and I, we've worked hard on it, but we've been really good at having these very vigorous debates, while at the same time having immense respect and admiration for what each other does.
Yeah, kind of attacking the problem rather than the person when you're having this
Yeah,
vigorous debate. Yeah.
and the best idea wins. It doesn't matter what your title is, or if you're a founder, or even early employees, or any employee. It's the best idea that wins the day, and there can't be any ego saying, "Well, that wasn't my idea," or "My idea is obviously not that great, but I still want to push for it because I can't be seen to be wrong in front of the whole company." Like that, just you can't do any of that stuff.
No, that's good. That's
That
good.
it's really important actually that I think I just say this last thing, because it
Please.
and it would be wrong for me to not give the hardest thing as a startup founder, I think, um is that I think his name is Scott from Rally, had this great tweet, and lots of people have tweeted this stuff the other day, but that like I think a really good company has a contrarian idea. Most people think it's wrong. Not only did they not have the idea, but even further than that, maybe they thought about it, but if they thought it was wrong, and most people think it's wrong. But the
Mm,
job of the founder is to prove why everybody's wrong, and that's
mhm.
where the most value gets created. In my view, is that a contrarian idea that you believe to be true, and then you convince everybody and show everybody that it's true. And this, I think, is very fundamental to all startups, especially the successful ones. And why that is so difficult is because it's rejection every single day. Like
Mm.
99.999% of the feedback you get from the outside world when you're trying to convince the world that a contrarian idea you have is true is rejection. And that can be so demoralizing. You have to be so convicted in your idea to continue and pursue.
And we've seen many. I mean, you may be wrong in certain. We've
Yeah.
seen plenty of founders who have
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
actually probably been wrong.
Well, the thing, most contrarian ideas are wrong.
Right.
So it's
Right.
so
Uh,
it's yeah.
so it takes a really strong. I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't think anybody's described it that way. We've all heard the generally you'll be. People will think that you're wrong. We've heard that over and over. That's kind of lifeblood of the startup space. But there are also those that are wrong. But that
Hmm.
conviction and holding on to it and then proving why it's right is, yeah.
Hmm.
I'm glad you brought up the demoralization on that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And how do you overcome that when you're feeling that that demoralization? How have you found to overcome that?
Well, I think part of it almost requires developing some psychopathy, that you have to be a bit insane. You have to be
Okay.
and almost probably narcissistic. And my wife is going through a psychiatry residency, and she's said to me many times, like, there's a bit of narcissism, but healthy. Like, maybe there's some healthy narcissism. Like, for you to withstand so much rejection day after day after day, and this is true for Airbnbs, Ubers, like the best startup, Stripe, like all these companies
Yeah.
that I have a lot of admiration for. They dealt with so much rejection early on, and it's only in hindsight that everybody says, "Well, that was obvious." But early on, it's so you have to have this this it's almost a form of psychopathy that and I think you can develop it. You have to just harden yourself to it. And it can be dangerous. You can push it too far. You can, especially when you are wrong, which most of the
Hmm.
time you are. So it's yeah, it's I think a very tricky mentality to develop, but I think is needed to push through it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like the psychological issue that you've not the psychological issue, but rather how you've analyzed it from the psychological standpoint, because we certainly see it with some really big name successful CEOs, right? Who really almost do this carnival barker thing, and they don't care what anybody says, and it's almost like it's gone too far in
Right,
certain
right,
respects.
right.
But you're saying that there's almost this healthy, there's a healthy dose there that you could need to have in order to overcome some of that, some of the haters, I guess, is the
Yeah,
best way to say it.
yeah.
We're about 30 minutes in. If you have any questions for our guest, Mark Doble, about his company, Alexi Inc., and you can find them at alexsei.com. Get in your last questions. I see some of you out there watching, and you're being rather quiet tonight. So get in the last questions. We'll ask them here. Got about 10 minutes left. Mark, what was one of the biggest successes for you in this last 4 years? Was it the signing of a great
Mm.
client? Was it something else? Was it employee related? Tell us.
Um, yeah, I think the customers and the contracts and the deals, those are second order effects of what I think we have to do as a company, which is innovate, invent, build, create something of value that people want. And if you're focused on those things and really executing on those things, which this is what we focus on, then those things I think, obviously there's sales. Sales is really important, but I would say that one of the so building an AI in the legal space, I think the most important thing is recognizing that um, there is a really important difference between what is objectively true, and this is kind of like how an academic might look at the law, that objectively this is what the law says, there's all this ambiguity, and then how an advocate looks at the law. And I think this should be true for any kind of AI that I can think of, that it's critical to decide what side are you on. Are you aiming to be objective? So even if it's some contract review or anything like that, you need to decide, are you trying to be objective, or are you trying to aid in the advocacy element? And I know that might sound it's a bit abstract, but it I
Mhm.
think was fundamental for us to figure out this product market fit in our product, that we very much stay on the side of objective. We set out what is objectively true in the law to the best that you can, and then leave the advocacy, the interpreting of the ambiguity, resolving ambiguity. These are human advocacy elements that we leave up to our customers.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think that's fair. You have, otherwise you may be delivering a product that a legal research product that is if it's not objective, it may actually harm the case later on, harm the argument that advocate is trying to make.
For sure, yeah, and I think also if a lawyer gets an Alexi memo back and there is either some sort of opinion or argument or advocacy spin to it, they also feel like, well, that's not like I was thinking kind of differently, and it's just an awkward experience
Oh
to
yeah,
get. It's kind of like, well, what's the role for me here? Like, well, why don't you just finish the job for me then? And that's certainly not what we want to do. We instead just want to empower the lawyers to be the best advocates they can, to find that ambiguity, to be able to argue the ambiguity in their client's favor, and just empower them to be able to do that through being fully aware of the objective state of the law.
that's excellent. Karen over in the Facebook says she appreciates the perspective in tenacity in developing this legal tech tool. Thank you, Karen, for sharing. You are active. You're in the market throughout Canada, correct?
Yep. Yeah, except Quebec.
Except Quebec, okay. And you're in California. You're working to go live in California, or you are live in California?
No, we are now. Yeah, we've we've been onboarding customers on a weekly basis. So it's early March we started, and it's been going really well.
Okay, excellent. And then what do you see as the roadmap from there? Are you going state by state, or hitting the big California, Texas, New York first? And
exactly. Illinois, Florida. Yep.
Okay, excellent. And what do you see? How far do you plan to get? Are you trying to get there as many states as possible in the next year? Is it 18 months? How do you see that rollout taking place? How would you like that rollout to take place?
Yeah. Well, I think at least one, pushing for 2 more states by the end of the year to at least get some customers in a couple more states. I think would be good by the end of the year. Yeah, and it's all contingent on, like, we're in the early stages of a financing round, and a lot of that's gonna help with the growth. And at this point, where with this existing product, we're just in we feel like we've kind of done this 0 to 1. We're just kind of moving now to just export it to as many jurisdictions as possible.
Awesome. Okay. We have another question from Zoom. Once you got the idea defined, how was the process to identify the best technology to implement it? That's a great question.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's very easy to get sidetracked by the latest shiny technology. And there's, I think, too much, especially in the AI space. We've seen technology chasing a product or chasing some use case. But starting just from and it's a bit cliche, but from a first principles perspective, what are you trying to do? And with us, we recognize that, okay, really what the human lawyer is doing when they do legal research, you have to identify the authorities, identify the cases, which ones are authoritative, not authoritative, or more authoritative, less authoritative. And then it's summarizing and synthesizing that content into abstracted principles. And when we identified that this is really what's happening, then we said, okay, now what tools are out there to help us do this? And then you slowly work your way to find the tools that in our case, because there's not a lot of commercial applications of natural language generation technologies or text summarization in this sort of way. Reading a lot of academic papers. Fortunately, our CTO is very technical, an aerospace engineer, and he was able to do that. If you don't have somebody like that on your team, then find someone if you need that level of technology. If you don't, then there's lots of people, I'm sure, that could give advice. It's also what's the most affordable thing to do first, and that I think is also key, because you have to prove the market demand. You have to prove customers are willing to pay for it. As getting customers to pay for it before you even build it as much as possible, I think, is important too. So,
and that's kind of that 0 to 1 idea there.
Yeah.
That's great. This has been fantastic, Mark. How do people get in touch with you if they want to learn about Alexi? First of all, let me back up. How'd you get the name?
Oh, it's not as interesting as it might seem. The domain was available. It had Lex in it, which a lot of legal tech products do.
Yep.
It kind of sounds like a mysterious person in some ways. So that's it really.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah,
All
yeah.
right. Great. And how do people get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more about Alexi?
Yeah, you can email me, mark@alexi.com. Twitter, Doble. Yeah, those are the two best. Yeah,
All right. Excellent. And that's MKRDOBLE on
yeah,
Twitter, and Alexi is ALEXSEI, and that's .com.
correct. Yeah.
And Mark, any last minute thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think it's great. I love what's happening in legal tech. It's amazing. I think I would just encourage anybody out there in legal tech. You're going to reach a point if you're selling to law firms. You're going to reach a point where you realize that law firms are bad customers. Push through that. Don't feel that that's the case. Just feel they're a unique customer, and to get product market fit, you need to figure that out. Find something that they will buy because they will. They're running a business, and they might not be as rational as other business owners, and we I think we as an industry in legal tech need to stop blaming the law firms and lawyers for not adopting technology, and instead blame ourselves for not building the right products, the right models, all these things, to the payment models, to get them to adopt. Obviously there's things that they are
Sure.
not an ideal customer
Right.
if you're
Right.
looking at all the other markets, but
Right.
we need to just forget about that
Yeah.
and build for them.
Build for what you're trying to do.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
you're trying to sell. That's fantastic. Thank you, Mark. I want to make sure that you have said everything that you want to say about Alexi. Is there anything I didn't cover? And of course, we're limited in time here, but is there anything we need to cover that we didn't cover?
no, I would just say, like, we're often accused of I mean, I don't think people really understand the state of AI, how far it's come, what's actually going to happen in the next 10 years. People are seriously underestimating it, and I think it's really exciting.
Yeah.
But it's what's going to be happening in 10 years is, I think, way more than what most people are thinking. So
Yeah, I think a lot of folks had a 2015, 2016 hangover from artificial intelligence and
yeah,
blockchain related applications.
yeah,
And because everybody kind of claimed that they had some artificial intelligence, but it really wasn't all that workable or all that useful
sure,
at the time. So
yeah,
I'm glad you saw that you brought that up, because these things change as time moves on and they get
yeah,
more advanced. So,
yeah.
Mark, thanks so much for hanging out and spending a little time telling us about your company. We will be back next week with, I'll tell you in a second, who's joining us next week. And Mark, you're welcome to check that out. We're with Amicus. Amicus, we're going to talk about anti-money laundering and know your customer rules for in the legal space. So join us for that episode. We'll be back next Thursday. Mark Doble was our guest tonight. Alexsei.com, ALEXSEI.com. Check them out. If you need a legal memo on demand, you know where to get it. Mark, we will talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.